Hello, I'm Regina from Atlanta,
And I'm Carrie from Oregon.
and we are Wine Sisters of the Vine.
We are Wine Sisters. Cheers to change. How are you?
Cheers to change. I'm doing great, doing great. I'm so excited about tonight's episode.
Oh
We
my
have a
gosh,
very special guest today.
we do. From the Dundee Hills, and we are introducing Miss Paige Knudsen Coles. Paige, say hey. How's it?
Hey, so
Hey,
nice to be with you too.
yeah.
Very nice.
Thank
And,
you.
Thank you for having me.
and we have another friend stopping by as well, Leslie Maske from Ultimate Distributors, a female-owned distributorship in
Yes.
Atlanta, Georgia. Where you?
Hello.
Hey, Leslie. Leslie's stopping by to hear about our really fascinating story of 50 years on an Oregon vineyard. And we're going to chat with Paige a little bit about that today. Her family in 1971 planted a vineyard in the Dundee Hills, Dundee, Oregon Hills, the famous Red Hills of Dundee. And here we are 50 years later, and she's starting a label, Knudsen Vineyards, with the family that's been in the works here for a couple of years. And she's going to talk to us about that evolution. What happened after that first vine went in the ground, and here we are today. So, Paige, let's talk about
Good. Well, thank you.
Days.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be on your program. It's really terrific. And
Pleasure.
I am part of a family that has 3 boys and myself, so 4 siblings. And the vineyard started because of the passion of our father, Cal Knudsen, and our mother, Julia Lee. He was a lawyer by training who started getting very interested in just wine and just the wine culture. And he and she went to France for a trip in the late 60s. And when he came home, we were living in Portland at the time, he said, you know, Burgundy looks a lot like Oregon. I bet we could do in Oregon what they've been doing in Burgundy for many, many years, like thousands. And he started asking around for those who knew something about Oregon and planting vines. And there was a government agency that had published a brochure describing what the wine opportunity or the grape growing opportunity was in the Dundee Hills, in the Willamette Valley, I guess I should say. And there were 5 or 6 people mentioned: David Lett, David Adelsheim, Dick Erath, Jim Marsh. I'm not going to come up with the other 2. And he wrote to every one of them saying, I'm interested in learning more about what's possible in Oregon. May we talk to each other? And he connected first with Jim Marsh, who is our neighbor just across the road.
Right behind you there.
Right behind me, that's right. And he and Jim had a conversation, and Jim pointed across the hills to the west and said, there's a piece of property there, Cal, that you might be interested in. It's a former walnut orchard that was destroyed during the 1962 Columbus Day storm. Those of us who were old enough to be alive in 1962 do remember being in the basement with the portable battery-powered radio on, trying to figure out if a tree was going to fall onto the house. And in our case, we were lucky it did not. But in Dundee, a lot of trees were completely destroyed by 170-mile-an-hour winds. Was a hurricane, basically. And I don't think it's happened since. So with that, this property was available, and Dad bought it. And what he brought to the very young industry, if you could even call it that at the time, was a sense of scale, because he bought a 200-acre piece of property when most people were planting in their backyards, or 15 acres, 20 acres, maybe 30 acres. And with 200 acres, he could plant 20 and 30 at a time, so that by 1975, we became the largest vineyard in Oregon at 60 acres. So it didn't take, relative to today's scale, it didn't take much to be the largest vineyard in Oregon, because it was such a small industry. And then the third way he brought scale to an industry that was very nascent was to partner with Dick Erath, also another pioneer, in building the first winery in the Dundee Hills. Commercial scale. So it was definitely a commercial operation, not just in the basement where Dick had been producing wine to that time. And in 1976, they christened it Knudsen Erath Winery. And we made wine under that label for the next 11 years. So I'll stop there because I can actually talk and talk, and it might be kind of boring to hear me talk
No.
without anybody else saying anything.
Well, Paige, that story is so stunning because what your parents, both your mom and your dad, and you as a family, because you helped put those vines in the ground. I'm familiar with that story as I did the same thing. And I know that's a lot of effort and a labor of love. But what is really amazing, and I think Leslie will be interested in this, is from Knudsen Erath. Talk a little bit about the different labels that emanated after Knudsen Erath from the product.
Okay, well, I then have to go somewhat backwards because in 1972, the deal that Dad and Dick Erath struck was that Dick would live on our property because our dad at that point was a corporate executive at a large forest products concern. And he was the person who headed up their corporate acquisition department. And it was a company that was growing by acquisition. So he was very busy. He was on the road all the time, overseas and in domestic locations as well. And so he had a vision, but he needed someone to implement it for him. And so Dick, who had moved up from California to the Willamette Valley a few years earlier, was an engineer at Tektronix. And he had a day job and was planting his vineyards and doing as much as he could on the weekends and at night. But when Dad and he met, Dad offered to build a house for him and his family and allowed him to quit his job at Tektronix and focus completely on his vineyards and our vineyard. The deal was that he would help Dad implement his vision for our vineyard. And so in 1972, when that house was built, the basement became his winery. And he's written in several places, and I've asked him about this, that he actually designed the basement so that he could get tanks in there and things to make wine with. And he made 216 cases of wine in 1972 under the Erath Winery label, and continued to make wine in 73 and 74. And then in 1975, our grapes started coming online, and they realized, both Dad and Dick, that they were going to need more space because their volume was going to go up. And so that's when they built Knudsen Erath Winery as the first commercial scale winery in the Dundee Hills. So Erath Winery, then Knudsen Erath Winery.
And then
fast forward, that was 1976 to 1987. And in 1987, we experienced in Oregon what we call the second wave, which is when people from international backgrounds started paying attention to Oregon. And the first one to come was Robert Drouin of the Joseph Drouin family concern in Burgundy. And he bought a piece of property over the hill from us, just to the south, that continues as Domaine Drouin Oregon. Also in 87, a couple of Australians had heard about Oregon, and they came and spoke to my father because their intention was to create the commercial scale version of a sparkling wine house in Oregon, the first commercial scale sparkling wine producer. There were some people making sparkling wine in their basements, but it's a process, especially when you use the traditional method, that demands more specialized equipment, and you need economies of scale to make it all kind of pencil out. So that was their vision, and they had a facility, but they did not have a fruit source. And Dad not only loved Burgundy, but he loved champagne, and he really loved sparkling wine. So I don't think it took them very long to convince him that we would be the perfect vineyard for their operation. It was called the Dundee Wine Company when it first started in 1987, but it now goes by the name Argyle Winery. And Argyle remains the largest sparkling wine producer in the state of Oregon. And they continue to make very nice vineyard designated sparkling wines from Knudsen Vineyards. So that's a label that happened.
And Roland Souls was from Texas, who hooked up with the Australian people, Brian Crozier and the other partner involved, and Rollin became from Texas A&M via Australia and then back to Dundee. He was the first winemaker to set up at Argyle and run it for a couple of decades.
Yep, that's right.
In the meantime,
and so, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, in the meantime, there was other things happening on your property too.
So what happened for us was when we struck the deal with Argyle Winery, all of our fruit, over a couple of years, but it didn't happen instantaneously, but all of our fruit eventually went to Argyle for their production. And what Dick did in the meantime was he and my dad dissolved their business partnership in the winery. Dick bought the buildings out of the partnership and continued to operate Erath Winery from the middle of our property on a ground lease. He leased 5 acres on which all the buildings stood and still stand. And it was a long-term lease. So he did that for 20 years and developed his label, Erath Winery, to such an extent, very successfully, that he was able to sell it to Saint Michel Wine Estates from Washington State in 2006 as their first acquisition in Oregon. So they too were interested in coming into Oregon. And at that time, that gave us the opportunity as the landlord to welcome them to the property, to sign the lease to their business deal, but to inform them that we were not going to renew the lease when it expired in 15 years' time. So the good news is we gave them 15 years notice, which allowed them to plan, allowed us to plan. And amazingly, 15 years ended March 31st, 2020.
Oh, wow.
So that, yes, not that long ago, although a year ago. It's kind of amazing to think it was just a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we took possession of all the buildings, and we had planned the way having 15 years to plan allows you to plan, to renovate the existing structure and reopen as what we call the Outlook at Knudsen Vineyards, dedicated to our own family brand of wine.
It's
Cool.
fascinating.
That's awesome.
And so when we're talking about our first wine tasting today, the rosé, which I have this beautiful, beautiful color, this really
You
nice.
can't see it.
Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see yours, but when I move mine out, you can't see it.
Oh,
That's pretty funny. Yeah.
really pretty.
Okay, this is kind of torture because I'm having to keep my samples for Ryan and Susan's. Just so you all know.
Well, it's coming though, at least, right?
Yeah.
No, it's there. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about this wine, and I'll tell you about our vineyard first. We went from 60 acres to currently we farm 125 acres planted and producing. We are no longer the largest vineyard in Oregon, but we're pretty big, and we've been big for a long time. So we have 38 separate blocks on our vineyard, and we grow Pinot Noir. About 75% of our vineyard is Pinot Noir. About 23% of our vineyard is Chardonnay at this point, and then we have a very small block of Pinot Meunier, which is another story we can talk about later. And this rosé, this is the second time in 2 years, the second production of rosé under the Knudsen Vineyards family label. We consider it a Knudsen family wine. It's about 90% Pinot Noir from 2 blocks that are what we call, well, it's not what we call them, they are own rooted. So they were planted, one block was planted in 1974 and is still producing, and one block was planted in 1988 and is still producing, and is the block that was the first block of commercially farmed grapes that was outfitted with drip irrigation. There was no drip irrigation in the state until we started using it at the suggestion of Brian Crozier, who is the Australian who was one of the founders of Argyle. And we liked the effect so much that we retrofitted whatever we had already planted and then continued to plant with drip irrigation, so that our entire vineyard, which is 100 miles of 100 linear miles of rows, is all drip irrigated at this point.
And produces this.
And then the Chardonnay comes from a little piece down in, so it's kind of like 3 corners of the vineyard goes into this rosé.
Produces delicious fruit in this rosé, just really fragrant.
Mm-hmm.
It's fragrant. We do, for the amount of time a rosé is in oak, we put it in oak for about 6 months. And then we release it very quickly. We released this in March of this year from the 2020 vintage.
So it's 100% Pinot Noir, is right?
No, it's 90% Pinot Noir,
Okay.
10% Chardonnay.
Interesting, and obviously your Chardonnay as well. So you're blending with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what gives it. That's what I was tasting in there. There's a really nice citric, a little bit of citrus component to the rosé with a strawberry overlay too. So it's got the dimension that rosé, the Chardonnay adds just a nice little flavor to it, overlay. That's beautiful.
Right.
We like it too. Please go ahead, Regina.
No, I was just saying that little citrus at the end is, like that, what do we call it? Like a little Jolly Rancher cherry.
Yes.
At the end. Yeah.
Yeah. Green apple.
Yeah, exactly.
When we first started, I was determined to produce a rosé of Pinot Noir because it seemed like what we should do. But from our vineyard, it just never was quite right until we put in a little bit of Chardonnay, and then it was like that voila moment.
Well, it's well done. And I have to take another sip. Sorry, Leslie.
Oh yeah, thanks, rub it in.
Yeah, right, enjoy it in front of you. Right.
Paige, can I ask you before y'all go on the next one? So how much, with you guys being all Knudsen, how much is your case production going to be, since it's all you now, as far as how much wine you're going to make total of everything?
That's a very good question. We are now at about the 1,500 case level, and
Okay.
we're moving towards 5,000 cases. We also are quite aware that if you make it, you have to sell it. And so we're not going to go too fast. Having just opened this tasting room, it still needs to prove itself. There is, we're a 50-year-old business that nobody knows about, basically. And so we really have to market ourselves like the new kid on the block, even though we've been here for 50 years. And that's fine. That's fine, but it takes time.
Is there anybody now that still purchases fruit from you guys that put Knudsen on their label?
Yes. So Argyle for sure.
Yeah.
So I'll give you a sense of scale, Leslie.
Okay.
In a normal year, we can produce, let's say, 525 tons off the vineyard. And that equates to, let's say, roughly 35,000 cases.
Okay.
And let's just say we're just below 2,000 cases. So clearly we're not using all the fruit. And so what happens is all the fruit goes to Argyle.
Okay.
They vinify it. Sorry, that's what used to happen. I'm going to rephrase that. Almost all the fruit goes to Argyle. They vinify it, and we buy back the wine that is produced from our grapes that rises to the prestige level. And then we blend from there.
Okay.
In the last 2 or 3 years, we have been very particular about choosing several different producers whose names you would recognize to be able to purchase some fruit from our grapes. Sorry, our fruit is our grapes. Purchase our fruit from our vineyard to produce a vineyard designated Pinot Noir. And we have a sparkling announcement to make sometime soon about having started with yet another producer to produce our first sparkling wine, which will be released in 2023.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
What is it going to be? What sparkling are you going to make?
Blanc de Blanc. It'll be a Blanc de Blanc.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
Steal my heart out. That's my favorite.
So another thing that we have on our vineyard, Leslie, amongst other things, because we've been there for so long, we have so many different iterations of spacing of the vines, type of vine, where it's planted, how it's planted. In the 90s, my father was able to get a hold of, there's a better word for that probably, secure, some cuttings from France that David Adelsheim had been able to convinced the Burgundians that Oregon would be the best place to send some of these cuttings. So they're directly from France. And Dad put up his hand for the Chardonnay. And then he gave the task to his vineyard manager of many years to propagate from 25 cuttings, 2,500, so that he could plant a sizable amount of the Chardonnay in 1990. And it's the oldest planting of the French Dijon clones,
Wow.
76 and 96 in the New World. So all of North America, all of South America, all of New Zealand, and all of Australia. This is the oldest planted acreage. It's about 9 acres, and it's eventually has been named after our mother. So it's called Julia Lee's Block. And the sparkler that we're going to produce will be partly from Julia Lee's Block.
I can't wait.
I know, it's going to be good.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Yep, it's really exciting. We think Dad is probably dancing up in heaven.
He is. Hopefully he'll share some with my mama.
There you go.
And sparkling, that's right up your alley, right, Regina?
I love me a sparkling. I do.
Me too. I agree.
Sparkling's good every day.
Every day, that's
But
right.
it's something to celebrate every day, you know?
That's right.
Yeah.
So I love that sound of the popping of the bottle and just celebrating waking up.
That's kind of how Dad felt. And, you know, even before we were, I think, old enough to drink, although maybe I should sanitize that story, he taught us that the way to start an event so that it would go well was to start with sparkling wine. And in his view, if you started with sparkling wine, it meant that good things were about to happen. And then he'd toast. And that's how we were trained in that mode.
I love your daddy for that.
I like it.
I love that. That's the way I see things.
Mhm.
Well, Regina, you have
Yeah.
some questions, I think.
I do.
From this fascinating
So-
story.
Yeah, so Paige, you know, your history and your family's history is fantastic. And so the reason Carrie and I got together was to have this whole conversation about diversity and inclusiveness. We discussed topics about age and race and geography and all the things that make us different. But we have these commonalities. So can you tell us about the culture for girls in your family? I know you were the only girl, right?
Mhm.
And how did that contribute to your career as a businesswoman?
Well, I was the only girl. I was the second in line. So I had an older brother,
Mhm.
then myself, and then 2 younger brothers. And the way we rolled was everybody did everything. So there was no kind of the girl did this and the boys did that. Everybody did everything. So I ended up in an industry. I was in the financial services industry for a period of time when I first got out of college and business school. And that's a very male-dominated industry. And I'm actually not sure if it continues to be so, but it certainly was in the late 70s, early 80s. And it just didn't faze me because I'd grown up with brothers and, you know, they were all just like my brothers. So I didn't shy away from things, and I kind of took things in stride, and I think it did help navigating what probably were challenging situations, but not really. I don't know if that's quite.
You didn't recognize them as challenging. I totally get that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So
Awesome.
I never felt like I would have to hold back or not go ahead. The other thing I think that very much helped me in my career was I was an athlete from a very young age. I was a very active young person. My mother wanted me to take piano lessons, which I did dutifully. Her mother was a beautiful pianist and a professional musician, and my mother played piano beautifully. But I never wanted to practice. I'll never forget the recital that we had that my mother was just in the back going, oh my goodness, because I hadn't practiced because I was outside all the time. So I like to run, and I was a fast runner, and I went to a private school where everybody was encouraged to just do the best they could at everything. And so I was always chosen for all the teams because I was fast. And I think there's something about training and being on a team that really helps one's perspective on how to work with other people and how to be competitive, or just that you are competitive, and how to channel that energy properly.
And work with all different kinds of people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I know in regards to Regina's question too, you have set up a leadership at the Outlook and at Knudsen Vineyards that's all women too.
Yes.
So you want
Yes, I will say I don't think that was as intentional as it sounds, but it certainly.
But you did it. I mean,
yeah, no, and we have very capable people working for us, and many people who've been in the industry a long time. And I look to them for their experience because we've never done this tasting room thing before. And related to being a 50-year-old business, I call us the 50-year-old startup. because the tasting room part is new. Now we've had a year now, so we're getting better.
Well,
I think we're doing a good job.
Yeah.
I love the 50-year-old startup because it means that you reinvented and started something new, even though you've been in this space for a very long time. Your family has, yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, isn't that a great, authentic way to say it, Regina? I mean,
I do.
Yeah.
I absolutely do.
Yeah. And I think that's the charm of the winery and where you're coming from. It's not a older label that you can have this really inspirational thing. After 50 years, it's reinvention and new and transforming this wonderful property to the next, generation and outlook. And and I love the Outlook name too. I think that's great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I love that.
Very forward thinking. It's got great momentum, and yeah.
And so with that, before we go to the Pinot Noir, because I can't wait to get to that one. So as we are on this vein of talking about, it doesn't matter whatever age you want to do something, you had this dream, how to propel that. So do you have any advice for women who have dreams and want to go forward? Doesn't matter, their age, whatever is going on. Do you have any advice for women who have a dream in their belly? Whatever it makes their skirt fly out, right? It may be wine, it may be making jewelry, it may be making, cupcakes. I don't know, but what advice do you have?
Well, I'm going to start with a story of a relative of mine. My mother's mother was, as I mentioned before, a professional musician, and she trained in France at the École des Beaux-Arts and came back home to Seattle, which was the Wild West, and it was right at the time that World War I was starting. And she felt very compelled to contribute her skills to that time. And she convinced her father, and I must say, he was clearly no one I knew. This was my grandmother's father, for his open-mindedness. And she was 29 at the time, and he supported her financially to go across the ocean and start working to entertain the troops, not on the battle lines, but fairly close to the battle lines. And she's written a memoir, and I've read it recently, and she was going to be part of a girls group. And she found that she was one sister to two brothers, and my mother had two brothers. So we're kind of this line of single females in the family. And she didn't like the girl drama. And so she auditioned for the person who was organizing it, because she could accompany herself. She didn't need an accompanist. She could play and sing at the same time. And he recognized her talent and said, okay, off you go. And, she really put herself out there at a time when women weren't doing that. Her father supported her, which I think was a key element. But I look to her example as someone who must have been somewhat nervous at some point about being near the armed forces in battle conditions, but she was totally committed to providing the service of rest and relaxation to people who were, as we know about World War I, experiencing really challenging circumstances. And I just, from that, I'd say to people who have dreams, hang in there and don't be afraid. And you might have to roll with the punches. And things don't always go the way you think they're going to. But often I find that just when something doesn't work out the way you want it to, something else comes along that's as important, or can be as important opportunity as what you thought you should be doing that didn't work out. And I guess I would also say, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yes.
Especially now, there's so many women who really would love to be asked to support other women and have great experiences doing so. I'm the member of a women's professional organization called Women's Presidents Organization. And I'm in a particular chapter, and someone asked a question of the people in my chapter, and everybody came back with, I've seen it done this way, and I've seen it done that way, or no, I wouldn't go that direction. I would consider something else. I mean, it was all very helpful, professional, expert advice that they were just giving because they wanted to support another woman in business.
That's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's an awesome.
Leslie, the company that you work with, Susan Owens at Ultimate, is an all woman-owned distributorship as well.
Yep,
And
it is.
Yeah, and she started that a while ago too.
Yeah, the Ultimate's been around going on, oh gosh, 16, 17 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because she originally was one of the founders of Watershed, which was a restaurant here. But she loved wine so much, she wanted to open up her own distributorship, and it's grown from there. So Sue's just very enthusiastic and very infectious. I used to sell to her, and that's how we met. And then now I'm working for her, and we laugh about it because she said 10 years ago, did you think you'd be working for me? And I'm like, no, but I am, and I love it because she's awesome.
Yeah, and it's funny
That's
because
so great.
I met Sue not through Leslie. I actually went to a prisoner wine dinner with David Finney at her restaurant at that time, Watershed. And so it is a very small world where women connect, who would have ever thought I would have had a shop that I would have met Leslie, and, she works for Sue. So
now you're talking to Oregonians, right?
Well, and the other thing for you, Leslie and Sue, distribution is not exactly women-centric, I would think.
No.
I mean, it seems like a pretty male-dominated business still.
Yeah, she's the second female owner I've worked for. And it is a lot of hard work. I think we hustle more, if that makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
as far as, getting, trust us, let us build your brand, and Sue's done a great job at that people do come to us because our company's really good at taking a brand and growing it. We're 85% wine. And that's what we concentrate on. And then the rest is like handcrafted spirits and a little bit of beer, or that's it, but mostly wine because that's our passion. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that makes a difference in the
Wonderful.
marketplace too, that you have a real powerhouse. That's a lot of inventory of wine.
Yeah, but I mean, I have to say, I think our book is pretty diverse, and we keep adding and growing it. And I think that's really what's unique and exciting, because you work for like a larger distributor house and they're pretty set in their ways, like True Brands, then they're not as adventurous as bringing something in and trying to grow it. And I think we do a really good job at that. So
that's an accomplishment in this marketplace, which totally brings me to the next question. Everybody's biggest challenge during the pandemic, Paige and Leslie, you both Regina and I taped our whole first season through the pandemic. So In the marketplace, what do both of you think was the biggest challenge in keeping this brand going and the flame alive and moving it forward, where there was not a lot of light?
Well, I would say for us, it was, it seems like it should have been bad timing to have opened a new tasting room during pandemic lockdown.
Yeah.
But we were able to do the renovation we needed while Oregon was locked down, and it opened up about the time that we were completed with our renovation. So we opened with everybody else. And while there were probably fewer people who came than otherwise would have had COVID not been a factor, people came, and we had something to offer them. I think we were lucky because it happened in the spring, so that we had an outdoor season for most of the year. Became more challenging during the winter, when at a certain point we could only serve people here outside. And while Oregon is not Minnesota, it is also not Southern California. And so we had some issues with snow and a tent and, ice storms and things like that. And I would say the biggest challenge would be just trying to plan, because you never knew what the disease was doing, and therefore what the governmental response would be, and therefore what the restrictions would be on the business. So,
Yeah.
we just kind of kept plodding along. And to Leslie's position, we right before COVID, we had tried to get distribution in a couple of states, New York among them. And it was right when the tariff issue was reared its ugly head. And so distributors, seemed understandable to me, were very reluctant to take on new brands at that time. And then in COVID, depending on what and I'll be interested to have you speak to this, Leslie, depending on what your focus was, those, for example, distributors who were very focused on-premise restaurant or other eating establishment businesses really had to pivot, because so many establishments had to close.
Yeah.
Or not operate for a period of time.
Yeah. On premise here got hit very hard because most of the restaurants here in Georgia did close. There were only some could do to go. But a lot of them, it didn't, if their menu didn't work, you couldn't have that service. So it was a difficult time, but at the same time, with the challenges of, again, lockdown, everything that was going on, I think we got a little bit more creative as far as how selling went. Like the example, doing the virtual tastings, which I did several for Gina and other customers. People got very creative for their customers, especially on the retail side. They would do wine packs that their customer could pick up and do in the privacy of their own home, or, join a link. And so they got creative. Restaurants did the same thing. The one thing that was, I don't know if they did this in Oregon or not, but they bent the law for the restaurants that are open and let them sell to go. So yes. Some places were able to sell a bottle of wine or a cocktail in a sealed container. So Georgia as a whole, as difficult as it is to navigate, I think people got kind of creative, even to the point where you did a wine dinner online, which was very interesting to do, very different. But like I said, it was challenging. On-premise is starting to open back up in Georgia, which is nice. We also, the crazy thing is we are getting new restaurants. People are rethinking of what they're doing. So it's been interesting. It has definitely been interesting.
But you made it.
Yes. This is crazy. This is going to sound sad. Well, not sad, but it's kind of weird. We actually, as a company, had a really good year, which is just crazy to say. But I think a lot of that, even though you didn't have the on-premise side, people were still buying wine and still doing celebrations and smaller gatherings and things like that, and kind of kept it going. And I think that was, they weren't just worrying about a special occasion. They were, I'm going to enjoy wine, I'm going to do this. And that's the one thing I have noticed in the market, that people weren't waiting as much, and they're just going to go ahead and I'm going to, while I'm doing this, I'm going to make the best of it. And I think that's a big impact why people were still buying.
Yeah, I would say too, another aspect of challenge in the marketplace is just trying to be safe. At the beginning, no one knew quite how the virus would spread. And so there were many, and I really laud the Oregon wine industry for being extremely well organized and disseminating information very quickly to all the players. And, you know, we did not want to be the poster child for how the virus spread rampantly.
Oh, yeah.
So people were very careful, but just when you thought you had it down, something else would get discovered and you'd have to do it differently. And you'd want your people to be safe and your customers to be safe. So there's a lot of
that I think what we haven't had, I think, which has been interesting is not having, like I said, not having work withs or dinners and doing in-person stuff, because you are, you know, we're not going to have, as far as I know, we're still not going to have any suppliers until next year, until we know everything is safe. And that's where I was saying, getting creative has come in, planning stuff and trying to do things. Because like you said, things do change, and you have to be on top of that. I mean, I think most everyone at our company has finally gotten vaccinated, which is good, but we're still doing masks and all that kind of stuff with everybody else.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to propose a toast. Regina, don't you think it's time to taste some of that delicious Pinot Noir? Sorry again, apologizing in advance.
I'm sorry, Leslie. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
We're gonna swirl, and your time's coming.
Oh, it's beautiful.
This is our 2017 Pinot Noir, and it comes from 2 blocks on our vineyard, one of 777. It's a majority of 777.
So we got to get it here because I want to. I love this.
It's our wines, because we're higher in elevation, take a little bit longer to integrate in the bottle. So this still has some time to age in the bottle before, but it's perfectly lovely to drink now. But it's
for sure.
It'll get even lovelier, I think, as time goes by. It's a little bit lighter. It was a warm year in 17.
Well, and the classic Jory Red Hills taste from the Jory soil, it's got the beautiful, rich black cherry that's so typical of our dirt, so to speak, in the Dundee Hills.
We have the block that this comes mainly from was planted in 2001. And then we have another percentage that was from vines that were planted in 2012. It was a replanted block that's 667 clone. So it's a nice mix of different elevations on the vineyard too. Block 16 is a little bit lower in elevation. So Leslie, for your benefit, our vineyard is large, and we start at about 500 feet of elevation and go all the way up to 1,000 feet in elevation. And the sweet spot for our still wines is kind of that low end, 500 to about 650, 700. Although with global warming and having these warm years all in a row that we've had the last few years, we can kind of keep going up the hill a little bit farther because the temperatures allow us to get riper fruit a little bit higher on the property. And that's quite aromatic, isn't it?
It is beautiful.
Beautiful nose. Beautiful.
The other thing about Dundee Hills Pinots, Leslie, and I'm probably talking to someone who knows it even better than I do, the tannins are not harsh. They're very silky smooth tannins. You know there's tannin in there, but it doesn't assault you when you drink.
They're very
nice,
velvety.
smooth.
Yeah.
Yep.
Lovely.
And it's very good with food, all kinds of food.
Yeah, the charcuterie boards that you have in your store, Regina. Regina's got amazing charcuterie boards. I could use one about right now. Too bad you're in Atlanta.
I could too. Should have made myself one.
because I can just taste that. I just really, that really nice, rich, from the charcuterie board, the olive and the salami and so you could really do appetizers, main course. I mean, this is a real player.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I would love to be able to have this, with a charcuterie board, because it's just, I love this.
It's very drinkable. We make wines that are very approachable, and that's really they're so site specific. It's because our vineyard is so well tended and has been well tended for many, many years.
By Mr. Alan Holstein, the former vineyard manager.
Yep, that's one.
Yeah, of Argyle.
Mm-hmm.
And Leslie, that is the I don't know if you heard in the introduction too, that is actually the vineyard behind Paige.
Yeah.
So, that's amazing.
Yeah. And if I move, that's Mount Hood over there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so beautiful.
Oh, it's right in the back of my head.
I cannot wait to come. I cannot wait to get there.
You have to come. You all have
I'm
to come.
coming. I'm coming.
Mm-hmm.
And we can go all the way up to that Mount Hood volcano and then back down to the vineyards. That's the classic Oregon drive, to go all the way up to Timberline on Mount Hood and come down through the vineyards and and then back up at Paige's. She's got that nice elevation too, which makes a difference.
It is absolutely beautiful. Just your backdrop is fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty great. And one of the things that I really love is to share it with people, especially during these COVID times. You can actually see people start to relax when they sit on the terrace or sit in the patio, look out over the view, have a little glass of wine and a little charcuterie plate, and they just become different, than when they walked in. And it's the power of nature, as far as I'm concerned. But a view does it for me.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Well, and that's the stewardship conversation.
Maybe you can come with me.
Yeah, you guys, come on. Wow, that kind of, I mean, and it is because of people like you coming to visit that Oregon, that we continue to thrive, right, Paige? I mean, people visiting the world.
That's right. And more people are visiting. It's interesting. I think with vaccinations, percentages of the population going up, people are feeling more comfortable. There was a couple from Toledo, Ohio today that had been here since Sunday. They were celebrating their 30th anniversary. We had a couple of young ladies from New Jersey. Somebody else from Kansas was here yesterday.
Okay.
So people are out and about.
That's awesome.
The stewardship of the land, just as you were mentioning about stewardship of the land, let's talk about that a little bit for your vision, and you're envisioning how you are shepherding the land. Obviously, you're taking wonderful care of it, and you care greatly about the environment, and I know that's a real cause that's near and dear to your heart. So you want to talk a little bit about the environment and stewardship of the land with Knudsen?
Yeah. So we operate as a certified sustainable vineyard, and we have 2 third-party certification organizations that we have been vetted by. The first is something called Low Input Viticulture and Enology, which goes by the acronym LIVE. And in order to be LIVE certified, you have to agree to viticultural practices that are sustainable in their definition. And so we do what LIVE suggests we do, and we don't do what they suggest we not do. The second certification is from a group called Salmon Safe. And salmon here in Oregon are very important. And we have a creek running through our property, kind of daylights up above the outlook. And then, and it's a little bit season specific in that you get more water when it's raining, a little less water when it's hot in the summer. But it ultimately drains down into the Willamette River. And so we need to be practicing viticultural techniques that do not include chemicals that would damage a salmon's habitat. And so we're very particular about that. For example, I've just hired a landscaping company because we have some nice new landscaping with our renovation. And I'm very clear that he said, well, we'll just treat all your weeds. I said, actually, no. You'll have to hand pull them until you can prove to me that whatever product you want to use does not violate the salmon safe guidelines. So he's very open to it. It's not like we're having a disagreement, but that matters to us. We also have been very forward thinking in our use of water. We did not have water on the property when Dad bought it in 1971, but he was a pretty visionary guy, and he could see that as the population grew in Portland, which is about 25 miles north of us, people were going to start moving our direction. And when there became a conversation about who would have first dibs on the water, his point of view would be that the people would have first dibs on the water. And so he wanted to make sure that we had our own little ecosystem working on the vineyard. So he gave the task to Alan Holstein, who was our longtime vineyard manager, to create a water district, and starting on the property, and starting in the mid 80s, we started drilling wells. We now have 6 wells and 2 surface water collection ponds, so that we can pull water when we need it, and we can collect water during the rainy season, and then we just circulate the water during the growing season. And then we're on in terms of viticultural techniques, we're aiming to be a property that practices regenerative agriculture, which will be much less tilling, no use of herbicide, using cover crops that provide nutrients to the vines by the very type of plants that they are. And that helps with erosion control. We have little channels in all of our vineyard roads that collect the water, so that all the dirt doesn't end up at the bottom of the hill, which it ultimately would if we didn't practice things like that. So it's an ecosystem that it's taken a long time to understand, and I probably still don't have it all in my education yet either. But our vineyard managers are very skilled and are very willing to share their knowledge with me and others. So it's been fun to learn more.
Well, and that's a rarity in now, as vineyards do become larger corporate entities. It's a rarity that a family-owned, 100% family-owned vineyard, you're able to control whether or not there's pesticides used on the property. You're able to control how you grow those grapes, and that says a lot. And I'm sure that's why people love to relax, not only for this magnificent view, but they know that they're getting clean wine.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I will say there are other producers in Oregon that are way ahead of us in terms of organic farming, biodynamic farming.
In many ways.
So Oregon's really, I don't know if we're ahead of the curve, but we're definitely on it.
Mm-hmm.
You're competitive.
And so I'm always learning from others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely. And that's the whole point. I mean, is making an effort to sustain the environment. And the word sustainable, I think, definitely pertains to the vineyard. So
definitely. Well, we are certified sustainable, so we get to use that moniker.
Right. Yeah. Well, and you
had mentioned some of my other interests, and Regina and I have talked about what's going on in Atlanta, but for 20 years, I've been a national board member on a conservation organization's board. Mm-hmm. It's called the Trust for Public Land, and we preserve land and create parks for people, ensuring livable communities for generations to come. Mm-hmm. And in Atlanta, I was telling Regina that we've been active in several very notable projects. The Atlanta Beltline, we have an Atlanta Community Schoolyards program. Chattahoochee River Greenway was a big project we did with the Nature Conservancy a while back. The historic Fourth Ward Park was in 2011. Mm-hmm. And we also helped preserve Martin Luther King's birthplace, which is now a national monument, if not a national park. And then for you, Regina, because I think you may live in this neighborhood near Vine City, near the stadium.
So I did growing up. Yes, I did.
Growing up.
Mm-hmm.
There's a new park that's just been part of it, 16 acres,
Mm-hmm.
has been completed, which helps control flooding, but it's on Atlanta's west side within a very walking distance of the stadium. It's called Cook Park, named after a gentleman named Rodney Mims Cook Sr.,
Okay.
who was quite an important person in Atlanta.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that's my side of town where I grew up. I could see, what is now Mercedes-Benz Stadium from my bedroom window or my mom's bedroom window. And so I think it's fantastic that you have these inroads here to Atlanta. And so all of those things have really lent itself to making a lot of these communities better, right? So Old Fourth Ward was, they were built with housing projects. So I think it's fantastic, the fact that, now it's a place where people love to go. Absolutely. So we thank you for your efforts in that respect.
Well, it's a community project. We always work in places where the community wants us to come in and work. So we're not an organization that says, let us do this for you. It's like, what do you want? And we'll help you do it.
Right.
And I've been to the historic Fourth Ward Park. Yep. Makes a lot of difference to communities.
It does. It does. It absolutely does.
Wow. And I think that calls for another taste of another wonderful Knudsen wine, the Chardonnay.
Yes.
Chardonnay. So as I mentioned earlier, we farm mainly Pinot Noir, but we have about 23% of our vineyard is in Chardonnay. And just for the scale of Oregon acreage, I think it's almost 20,000 acres of Pinot in Oregon, and maybe 1,500 acres of Chardonnay. It's really not very much. And we have and it's getting more. Chardonnay in Oregon is really coming into its own.
Yes.
We farm mainly the Dijon clones 95, 76, and 96. This Chardonnay, our 2017, is 50% 95, and then equal parts of two different blocks of 76. And there's a lovely austerity about this wine. We have lovely acidity on the finish, and yet the fruit can really shine through. And we get lots of compliments on our Pinot Noir. It's kind of expected that you might, but I say, I'll come up to people who are tasting a flight, and I say, what do you like? They say, well, the Pinot is great, but I've got to tell you that Chardonnay was really something else.
It is really special. And I call myself like a Chardonnay guru, but it is really fantastic. I love it. It is beautiful.
It goes through a full malolactic fermentation, so it's got a really creamy, smooth mouthfeel.
But it has a great acidity that kind of lends itself to that, upkick at the end of the finish. It's like the finish is like beautiful.
Yeah, it's like a symphony right at the end, the crescendo. Yeah. Wow. And with that, talking about a crescendo, you spent the last 6 months of this year with your home and family in Minnesota. Of course, Oregon's your second home, but basically, your family members are in Minnesota. And share the joys and challenges with us of living on the vineyard in Oregon, establishing this. While you were establishing the tasting room and communicating with your family and, keeping all that going. That was a job, sister.
It was definitely a job. And we have 3 children. One is 32, one is 30, and one is 28. And so they're all grown. One lives in Minnesota, one lives in Los Angeles. He just got married to his longtime love during the pandemic. And the third child lives in Denver. So everybody is off on their own, doing their own thing. And we thought, my husband and I thought, when this renovation was going to occur, that of course pre-COVID, that I was on a plane all the time anyway, so I'd just get on a plane and go home for a long weekend, and then he'd come out and visit me. And then when the state locked down in the middle of March and the renovation began at the end of March last year, we took the government seriously about not doing any non-essential travel, so we just stayed put. And I must say, I think it was a lot easier, if any of that's easy, on me than it was on my husband, because I was always with people. We were doing this project, it could go ahead because construction was considered an essential industry. I had a place to go, I had people to see, I had decisions to make. And not that he doesn't have all those things too, except he couldn't go anywhere because he was in Minnesota. Everything was by Zoom. He couldn't go to the office. And he was by himself in our house, which, you know, that gets old fast. And for me, I think I was really quite, and then we opened and then it was busy, and then he would come out and visit me, which was great. None of the kids have been out, and we all decided not to go anywhere for the holidays for the reasons that the government didn't want anybody to be going anywhere for the holidays,
Right.
because of COVID spread. And I was okay for Thanksgiving. I stayed here for Christmas, and it was way harder than I thought it was going to be. It kind of put me into a tough spot. I came out of it, but that was hard. It was definitely hard. And you guys, you know, Gary, from Oregon, it's not the sunniest time in the winter in Oregon. So it's not
Well,
like you wake up and go, oh, at least it's sunny.
right. I think we can all, I might have another sip of Chardonnay thinking about how we all lived through the hopefully one and only pandemic Christmas.
Yeah, let's hope.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I can only imagine what that must have been like, because, you know, my family is here in Atlanta. I mean, I have family outside of Atlanta as well, but my immediate family is here. So even though we were locked down, we were able to kind of get together outside. So, yeah. I mean, we had masks and everything, but I can't imagine not being with my family. So that I can imagine it was really difficult.
That was hard. What was the saving grace for me is I'm renting an apartment down in Dundee from a young couple that has two little children, two boys, one that was born at Christmas time. And they have a lovely home, and you can hear what's going on upstairs. I'm in the downstairs. So I can hear when they're having a good day, and I can hear when they're having a bad day. And I know what Oliver's footsteps are going back and forth. I know with the dog, I know the cat. and it's endlessly fascinating. It's endlessly charming, you know. So I don't say that like it's been a bummer. It's been like what's kept me from feeling really isolated. I've been around this young
you had
family
around you, even though it wasn't your family, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's been helpful.
Paige, I mean, I have learned so much from you. I mean, even though we had a pre-conversation, I've learned even more tonight. You're an amazing person. I like
you. Thank you, Regina. I appreciate it. It's been a great thing for me to have come into your sphere through Carrie.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So Carrie and I are connectors, and so you know, I love her, and I just, you know, have learned so much about your story tonight. Much respect for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, what an achievement. You've had an achievement, Paige, and I think that deserves accolades. And
well, I appreciate that. Yeah. You know, one of the things that we were going to touch on, so I'll just bring it up, is diversity in the industry. And you know, Oregon is historically not a particularly diverse state, and the wine industry is not particularly diverse. And we all get it. It's not that nobody is paying any attention. But Knudsen Vineyards, I'm really trying to embody a place or create a place where all people feel welcome. And so we have a phrase on our job descriptions and our hiring documents that says, our belief is that in inclusion across race, gender, age, religion, identity, and experience, unity makes us stronger. Knudsen Vineyards proudly exemplifies that all are welcome here. And we feel really, we can always do better. There's no question that we can always do better. And we do feel as though we are working hard on creating a space for where people feel safe and feel welcome, no matter what their background, what their race, what their gender, what their age, all of those factors.
I think it's huge that you have that, your company and your family business has that self-awareness to be able to do that, because not everybody's doing that, right? And so I think it's phenomenal that you checked yourself and checked your family's business to say that we're gonna, put this into we're gonna make this a thread in our business. That's huge.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. We're just, as I said, this little startup, and so there are other places that are farther along the curve than we are, but we're always looking and listening and trying to do what we can. We had our first diversity, equity, and inclusion training for our staff a week or so ago, which was very informative. And so I hope to keep that going through this year and into the future as well.
So I would say you're a pioneer in that respect, because how many other, wine businesses, vineyards are doing that, right?
Well,
so,
I definitely am not the only one. So
no, I know you're not the only one, but
I refuse to take credit for it all.
Of vineyard owners that are doing that, and I think it's amazing that you had that, again, the self-awareness to say, hey, we want to have this thread of inclusiveness and diversity in our space.
Yep.
So.
I'm trying to be more well, I always want to be respectful of everyone. Many of our vineyard workers are Spanish speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I got tired of expecting them to understand what I was saying, and it's totally not wanting them to have to come up with English that maybe wasn't their first language or that they felt comfortable speaking. So for the past year, I've been taking Spanish lessons.
Look at you.
And I know just enough to be dangerous at this point. And I've learned how to use Google Translate, which I recommend to everyone who's trying to communicate with people.
Love Google Translate.
Yes, it comes
Google
in handy.
Translate. I love Google Translate.
It's not perfect. It's not perfect, but you
No, but
can get a long way.
kind of closer to.
Right.
You haven't offended anybody yet so far.
I don't think so. I don't think so. And so one of the things we're doing is we have written, my brother in particular was really great about this, has written a history of Knudsen Vineyards, and he was very clear that we should publish a book this year. And I said, well, okay, let's do it. And so he wrote the narrative, and we've come up with a ton of pictures. Carrie's seen some of them.
Wonderful.
From the family albums, etc. And we've had the entire thing translated into Spanish, so that
nice.
I can share it
That's so
with
cool.
the vineyard workers in their native language.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that's
You
cool.
can take pride in that too. That's awesome, Paige.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And you know what, Regina, you know what I really think is very significant from this conversation, and also just Leslie too, you walk the talk. You're not just talking the talk, you're walking the talk. And I that's huge. And
well, I appreciate that. And the one
thing,
thing
totally transparent.
I definitely do not want to be, paying lip service to it. So I don't want to get too much credit before I, let's just one foot in front of the other.
What were you going to say, Regina?
No, I was just saying, I was totally transparent with Leslie today when we were, tasting wines today. And I said, she's an amazing person. And so we talk about commonalities and differences. So I have a whole lot of respect for you, Paige, because you came from a very different background than I did. But to have us on this conversation today is everything to me, because, who would have ever thought that me growing up, seeing Mercedes-Benz from my mom's bedroom, I would be on a call with you today, and then Leslie is such a major player in my, business. It's, you know, it's more common, so many more commonalities than differences. And so
Yes.
that, to me, is the diversity and inclusiveness that we need to bring to the table. And so that's the reason for all of it. Obviously, we love to connect people, and I want to, you know, sell Knudsen wines in my shop here in Atlanta, or here in Conyers. We're right outside
I
of
hope
Atlanta.
to come to Atlanta. I love Atlanta.
Yes. And the fact that you have so many inroads into Atlanta and you understand our geography and, you know, our communities, I think it's fantastic. So thank you for your time. And thank you, Leslie, for your time.
Thank you, Leslie,
Well,
very much for.
I am super excited. Of course, I have to wait to taste the wines, but I
know.
trust y'all. But I'm super excited. I'm looking forward to going and seeing Ryan and Sue and bringing the samples and bringing the story and everything. So that's awesome. It's a lot of history, a lot of great history, a lot of great things going forward too. So
Thanks, Leslie.
Yeah.
I would also like to thank, that was beautifully put, Regina, and this has been another amazing episode. That I get so inspired, and I could just talk for another 3 hours, but unfortunately we probably should go.
Everybody's got to go to bed.
Right. And you guys came home. This exemplifies really the work ethic of people in this industry, and you guys are amazing. You work all day at your jobs, and you in Atlanta are 3 hours ahead. You're into your evening, and what are you doing? You're still working. And that's here's to you guys.
Yeah.
Well, I really don't. I mean, right now, I don't think I'm working. I feel like I'm gaining so much right now as a human being, just from the story of you, Paige. And I appreciate that. I learned a lot tonight that I didn't know before, and I have even more respect for you.
Well, thank you. It's been a great opportunity for me to be in the conversation, so I really appreciate having the space to do that and to do it with you all.
Yeah.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. You exemplify our conversations that Regina just discussed, our commonalities, amplifying our commonalities. That's, we should all have more conversations like this, hopefully, in the future. And it has been delightful to be with Paige.
Thank you, Leslie, for hanging out with us.
Maske. Regina, my sister, love you like a sister. And signing off from Oregon and signing off from Atlanta. It's been another wonderful Wine Sisters Cheers for Change episode.
All right.
All
Thank
right.
you. Cheers.